Hey guys, Kyle, the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for Fire Force Season 2, Episode 7, and oh boy, this one is a this one is a major intense episode. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happened in this episode that basically that really has a lot of intense implications for the future of the series, because immediately jumping into this episode, we're introduced to Takaru's aka Juggernaut, his mother. And just through her introduction alone, we're already kind of shown the sort of culture and lifestyle on the Chinese peninsula and how it contrasts to the Tokyo Empire, moreover to the point how the citizens in this part of the world have a much more like homegrown and carefree lifestyle compared to those that live in the more bustling and hectic cityscapes of Tokyo, as well as how much more they seem to value like the simple things about life. The simple things about life, like it's basically a whole it's basically they basically and it's allowed them to live a much more like wholesome and rustic life. Like you can generally tell that the people in the Chinese peninsula that they pretty much have this that they have this much more wholesome way of living. Obviously, like I said, like they're perfectly fine with just the simple things that they can live with. Um, and it's a little bit of it's a little bit of contrast comparison that's interesting to look at between how the Chinese peninsula lives and how the Tokyo Empire lives. Um, oh, and on a side note, Lick's line about telling the others to wear gas masks and none of them listening and acting reckless as shit is so awkwardly topical nowadays. It kind of hurts. Like, really, that whole thing. I'm not gonna say anymore, but let's just say, given current circumstances, it's very, very topical. Now, with that said, for as much as this season has improved, the one area that the show and this particular episode suffered on is capturing the size and scope of some of the landscapes, because that monstrous rocky formation we see in this episode not only had much more detail to it in the manga, but it was also shown in such a way where its size not only looked gigantic in comparison to our heroes, but it also had an appearance that separated itself from the rest of the landscape. Whereas here in the anime, it looks just like a misshapen part of the desert. Like that, there's nothing that makes it stand out compared to the rest of the landscape. So in that respect, it's a little bit it's a minor thing, but it's a little bit of a fail on the anime's part that it failed to make that structure just kind of stand out more. Although I did have Although I do have to admit, the anime did make up for it with that little battle against the Desert Snake, which I know there are conflicting opinions on CGI being used in a fight sequence, but this was definitely one of the more reserved uses of it, especially considering the fight itself wasn't very long anyway. But with that all said, let's get into the major revelations of this chapter. The first one being, we got a pretty heavy revelation that there's the equivalent of an entire army of infernals that have been wandering around the desert pretty much since the beginning of since the end of the first great cataclysm. And this revelation puts into perspective of not only just how wide of a scope the human combustion has spread beyond Tokyo Empire, but also how uncontrolled the situation has actually become. And just knowing the simple fact that there are this many infernals still active in the world shows the horrific reality that everything that the Fire Force has done, everything our heroes have done up to this point, has not made a single dent in actually solving the problem, and that largely their efforts up to this point have really just been the equivalent of dropping a pebble in the ocean. So like it's really showing that in order to really make any sort of progress, they have to start expanding their reach beyond just the Tokyo Empire. Otherwise, there will be no end to this. Like it isn't going to end. And I'm and the fact, honestly, that the Tokyo Empire hasn't even considered of trying to expand their reach in order to reach kind of reinforces even more that the French corporation, the French Hodge corporation is doing something in order to control this, like is doing something in order to kind of in order to keep this very much can keep this truth away from like the Tokyo Empire itself. Like it's obvious that the bigger danger basically lies outside the Tokyo Empire, but they want to just kind of they want to take care of its own self, which yeah, but yeah, in order to actually solve this problem, our heroes and the Fire Force as a whole, they need to expand their reach outside. Otherwise, this whole situation is never going to. This whole situation with the human combustion is just never going to end. And we get introduced to a new character, a mole that can speak. And I think this is a mole that can speak as well as a raven or a bird as well. And I think this is one of those interesting testaments for how good this series is. That for as fantastical as this. For as thematically grounded as this series is, it's still fantastical enough and has dipped its pool into that and has dipped its toes into that outrageous pool of outrageousness enough to where we can have a mole person, or we can have a talking mole, or a freaking talking bird, just talking animals in general, and you don't question it at all because it's something that still fits right, that still feels right and fits perfectly in this world. And honestly, for as weird as it is, I really just like, and honestly, again, the one thing this episode did is that through being introduced to this concept, though, we kind of see just the possibilities and the capabilities of what the Adolla Burst can do. Like, it isn't just like a fighting technique, or it's not just anything like that. It is legitimately a power that can reshape the world as we know it, and reshape the laws of the world as we know it. And on a lighter note, though, with the introduction of these just two characters, I really like how the episode itself just kind of let the characters sit down and have a conversation, no matter how strange it might have seemed. Although, and going back to what I was saying about the Adolla Burst, though, having this power to possibly change like everything, to change things, the plot relevance of just knowing these talking creatures, as well as knowing these talking creatures exist, as well as this oasis, in the strangest ways, also serves to give us progression on Vulcan's dream of restoring the world where animals can live in again. Because while at the same time also giving us more, again, just a lot more insight into the capabilities of Adolla Burst. Because picking up from what I was talking, because picking up from the whole like capabilities of what the Adolla Burst is capable of, we basically see that the Adolla Burst has done more than just caused animals to talk and caused animals to evolve and talk and whatnot, but also through the use of another like Amaterasu structure called Turnbuckle, it's basically caused the environment to change and to shift and to just like and grow. Like, we basically see an entire freaking forest in this episode because of what the power of the Adolla Burst has done. So, tying it back to Vulcan, it's clear as day his family knew a lot more about the capabilities of the Adolla Burst than the government did, or even before the government did. And utilizing that knowledge, you can see that they created Turnbuckle as a means to kind of test out that little theory of the possibilities of what the Adolla Burst can do by constructing the second structure, and lo and behold, it worked better than they expected. did better than they expected. Like, because as we even see, there was obviously a downs, because we basically this episode, it showed us both the good and the bad of the power of the Adolla Burst. Like, again, it has caused this. The power of the Adolla Burst has caused this whole forest and this whole and the landscape to change and shift. But on the other end, we also see how the negative of what the Adolla Burst has done, which is that it's caused, even though it's caused animals to talk, it's also caused certain animals to basically transform into infernals as well and become ravenous. So ravenous infernals aside, if Vulcan could get his hands on this type of if Vulcan could get his hands and study this kind of knowledge, and just learn what his family did and apply what worked and what didn't, then we'll be onto something major that can change the whole dynamic of how the Adolla Burst is utilized in the future. Like, again, it could be the thing that helps him achieve his dream, but it's also something that needs to be properly utilized. Otherwise, it will have the after effects of turning animals into monsters, like we see like we see here. But it does present that the Adolla Burst does have some applications that are very freaking useful for the future of this world. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Crunchyroll. Dead Night of signing off. Later, guys.